Thank you, Sam. Now it is my pleasure to invite Armand MacKenzie of First Phosphate on stage, who will introduce and moderate the Indigenous Women's Business Panel.
كويس ودي تايك نمندين ودي وامدوت ودي كيبك كيبك تا إنوي مونني كي نمندين ودي ويجي إنشوغو إنجن ويجي وان Yvonne MacKenzie. So welcome to you all. Bien sûr, it was a bit of a land acknowledgement. My name is Armand MacKenzie. I'm president of First Phosphate, a wonderful company with a magnificent deposit. And the ticker is CSC double comma PHOS. So if you're interested to invest, please do so. So I said a few words in my Indigenous language to talk about Quebec. So it's some sort of a land acknowledgement, and my Cree friends that I see over there would, and Matthew, Grand Chief Matthew could come back in the back, would acknowledge the fact that Quebec is an Innu word, meaning Ashtam Quebec. Quebec means come ashore, or come sit at a table, or come ashore. When we first saw the ships coming in, the sail ships from the Ile d'Orléans or Orléans Island. So Quebec is an Innu word, meaning come to the shore. Isn't that the case, Grand Chief Matthew can come? Ashtam Quebec. There you go. I have a validation over there. So we have a fantastic panel. I'm very happy and the honor to have two fantastic guests with two fabulous Indigenous women who got involved in the mining industry, because I believe when we are part of the industry, it works much better. We discovered a lot of debate, about the tariffs and so on and so forth, and how do we confront those tariffs, and how do we develop major national projects? Well, it's always much better when you do it with the Indigenous peoples at the table, and more importantly, when you have Indigenous women who have been at the forefront of the discussions leading to resource development in the industry. So welcome, Yvonne, welcome Jenny Lou, and the way we will proceed is we'll take the full 30 minutes to talk and to explain about the challenges, the gaps, and then the solutions or empowerment initiatives that we can build upon based on experience. First, I'll start with Yvonne and then Jenny. But Yvonne, she just published this book, and I had time to have a quick glance to it. Just around the corner, Yvonne Rumbolt-Jones. She was Member of Parliament from Labrador. And I'll tell you how I met Yvonne in Labrador, because I'm a proud son of Labrador.
Yes.
Yes, I'm very happy to be from Labrador, because this is my homeland, this is our homeland, it's it's the big land, and I'll tell you why. I was skidoing from Shefferville to Goose Bay, to Churchill Falls, back in the days. And guess what I see on the pole? Yvonne's sign or campaign postcard on the pole. And I said, "Why? That looks fabulous." And I love the colors, the stripe. We have the most beautiful flag in Labrador: white, blue, and green, which is the land, and then the leaf as well, the spruce leaf. Yeah. So tell us about you, Yvonne. What brought you here in this field of the mining industry?
Nakamek, Armand, thank you, merci beaucoup. Atali hi, everyone, means welcome. Welcome to this forum. I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you, Armand, for inviting me. He is a very proud Labradorian, I can tell you that. He makes no bones about it. And we're very happy. And anyone who's in the mining industry in Eastern Canada, you're going to know Armand. He's been around many mining companies as an advisor, a facilitator, but more importantly, building those connections between Indigenous peoples and the corporations, which we know is fundamental to success for the mining companies, but also for Indigenous people. I've had a long career in politics. I retired during the last election, which was a month ago. after 30 years in elected politics representing the people of Labrador, and I'm very proud of that.
30 years, folks, 30 years.
Yeah. And in that 30 years, I've had a lot of engagement with mining companies, starting with the fact growing up in Labrador, you had to know about Wabush Mines, you had to know about Rio Tinto and Iron Ore Company of Canada, but most importantly, you had to know about the Labrador Trough. And I always said my entire life, you can't have a better address in the world than the Labrador Trough.
Yeah.
One of the richest resources in the world today, and in iron ore. So my first engagement in government was negotiating the Voisey's Bay deal, the Valley project in Labrador. I was part of the government, part of the cabinet when we did that deal. And of course, it's really ironic that Matthew Cunningham is here today, because the model we use to do the IBAs at that time was that of what the Cree had done in northern Quebec. At the time, they were the model for the country. They had one of the most sophisticated land claims on the planet, and we wanted to get it right. And so between governments and Indigenous communities, we use that as a blueprint to move forward.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think we have, like the Cree, one of the best agreements that you can achieve in IBAs for the mining sector.
Totally.
So in my book, you'll hear a lot about the work I've done over the years, but mostly my book is about a young girl, who's me, who grows up in northern Canada in a very isolated community to a very Indigenous family. I was raised in a very cultural perspective community and a very cultural perspective life. It was a lot of great things that happened to me, but a lot of very challenging things that happened to me that I'm still seeing happening across northern Canada today. And so my book talks about how do you get away from the things that have happened to you, how do you build that resilience so you can move on to do other things in society. And I was able to do that. And I want to share that story with so many other girls and women in northern Canada and Indigenous Canada, and that's why I wrote this book. Over the years, I've been an ambassador for sustainable mining in Canada. I've did a lot of videos and speeches with the Mining Association of Canada, got engaged with PDAC, and even back in the early years when Matthew was the chair of the Canadian Mining Association, Indigenous Mining Association, I was participating in that. And it was in all of those processes that I ran into a guy named Armand MacKenzie. And I'm very proudly like to say that Armand's love for the mining sector, for government and policy, also extends in his family. His daughter Alexis worked with me in the Department of Northern Affairs for a number of years. Very brilliant young woman, and I was very happy to have her on our team. So during my time in politics, I served as Minister and Parliamentary Secretary in the provincial government. In the federal government, I served as the Parliamentary Secretary to Natural Resources, to National Defence, with priority on the Northern and Arctic sector, and also for 10 years in Northern Affairs. I was also Canada's rep for the Arctic in the circumpolar countries of the world, and I don't have to tell you how challenging it is for many northern jurisdictions in the world today with regard to economic security, environmental security, food security, and economic security is very important. So right now I'm a retired politician. I'm promoting my book, and I'm doing my thesis on economic growth and sustainability in Arctic countries and subarctic regions. So I'm very happy to be here with you today, Armand, and I'm going to pass it along back to you.
Yvonne. You know, she's very honest and genuine And then she doesn't need to sugarcoat issues. She's passionate, obviously. She's a political person. When you pass the mic to a political person, be expected to try to save some time. So this is good. And actually, the book is here. It will be available for her at the exit at the lobby of this conference room. Jenny Lou, fantastic. She's from Ontario. And when I read her bio, I was amazed of all the things she's done in the mining industry. Because the purpose of this panel, really, beyond of saying that we need Indigenous peoples around the table when you speak about resource development in the country, well, it's also capacity building, empowerment, and that's what I like. That's what I like to talk about. And then Jenny Lou is a perfect example of how an Indigenous woman from young, humble roots can come up and be part in the mining industry. Please tell us about yourself.
Ani Bojo Kinawai, Jenny Lou Campbell, Nandishnakas, Ganapajing Nadonjaba, Bakwa Dodam, Nishnabbe Kwe and Dao. I just introduced myself in my language, Anishinaabe Moen, also known as Ojibwe. I'm from Serpent River, a proud Anishinaabe woman, Bear Clan, and very happy to be here. So, a little bit more about myself is I've been in the mining industry my entire career. It's not something that I thought I was ever going to end up in. My community of Serpent River First Nation is downstream from some uranium mines, the Elliott Lake uranium mines that operated from the 50s until the early 90s. And back when there was very little environmental protections, our waters were contaminated. The animals that were drinking from the water that we were then hunting and consuming affected our well-being. So I come with a dual perspective because I've also been very fortunate to work in the mining industry. I was a graduate of Lakehead University, Environmental Sciences, and had this big dream of being on the land, doing environmental monitoring, and it just so happened that my father was also a miner, and so he worked at the Hemlo Gold Mines in Marathon. And as a student, if you're going to college or university, you got to spend your summers working in the mines. So that's what really piqued my interest. I was 18 years old. I was underground as a supplies handler, delivering explosives and vent tubing, and I had no idea what any of that stuff was back then. Little did I know, further into my career, I would, become somewhat of an expert in many of those things. So I drove haulage trucks, I worked in the assay lab, and that's what really, I think, got my foot in the door, and I began my career with Vale up in Thompson, Manitoba. So I spent about 10 years up there in the mines engineering department, working in a number of various roles, from surveying to ventilation, and then got into mine planning, right from short-range planning all the way into long-range planning. But home was calling, and after about 10 years, I decided to make the move back to Ontario, back to Sudbury, and I worked with Hatch for about 5 years in project controls as an estimator. So I was able to work on a lot of the major projects that were in the Sudbury Basin with a lot of the Vale and the Glencore clients. I also got to work on the Voisey's Bay project as well, so there's a connection here with
There you go.
with Labrador.
Yeah.
And it just really opened my eyes to, I was sharing this with Yvonne earlier, when I was working as an estimator, it really bugged me that community engagement and business engagement was just seen as a line item within an estimate of a couple $100 million or $1 billion. So I thought, how can I really amplify Indigenous participation in the industry?
Wow.
So I kind of took a bit of a turn in my career and got into First Nations advocacy work. I was the lead on the mining file at the Snobbig Nation, and we represented 39 First Nations in Ontario. And that's kind of what led me to where I am today as the executive director for the Indigenous Centre of Excellence for Mineral Development, where our major goal is to increase Indigenous participation in the mining industry, but also bring together industry, government, and First Nations together to have these conversations that need to happen.
Wow. Didn't I tell you we have two fantastic people here?
Yeah, thank you.
Jenny Lou, from a previous life, I had issues with a sedimentation pond with another company. It would have been great to have you on our team to watch over all the works, all the things that we should have done better back then. So, one of the issues, and I don't want to dwell on this, but one of the issues at times, we face is Indigenous women in the mining industry. We only have 30 minutes left. Please tell us what are the challenges that Indigenous women are facing before we go on other successful stories. Just tell us briefly.
Okay, so first of all, if you look at Canada today, 10% of the workforce in the mining sector is Indigenous people, and about 30% of those are women, Indigenous women in particular. When you look at the other workforce in Canada, it's only 4% Indigenous employed, and about 25% women. So the mining sector is really the largest employer of Indigenous people and of women in the mining sector than any other workplace industry.
Yeah.
So I think that's great news. However, there's lots of room to get those numbers up. I'm going to give you an example. Of course, Jenny Lou and I share our contact with Vale. And actually, the first underground mine I ever visited was in Sudbury. And it was when we were doing IBA agreements with the province. And we took a full delegation of Indigenous people into Sudbury to show them what a nickel mine looked like, what it would look like once we go underground. And of course, 20 years later, we did go underground last year, which was great. So how did we get to, in Vale's case, 65% Indigenous employment, and over 40% of those are women? So how did we get there? We got there by partnering, first of all, with Indigenous communities, province, federal government, trade unions, and the company. And I always say that the first piece of money that the federal government gave us to start that was just 2 years before I moved to federal politics. And the money they gave us allowed us, it was like a seed money.
Yeah.
We could build on it. So the companies invested, others invested, and we started doing training with Indigenous people in communities. Keeping in mind that this is a fly-in, fly-out mine.
Yeah.
And also the communities around it were all isolated. The other model I see very much like it is in Nunavut, where we have Nickel Eagle, where we have Baffinland. Those companies operate in very much the same way.
Yeah.
And of course, they're trying to get their Indigenous numbers up as well. But designing education and training programs that met the needs of people that wanted to go to work there and met the needs of the company. It was about bridging those two pieces to become successful.
Yeah.
Over the course of Voisey's Bay, the Vale mine, the federal government has invested, in my time as the Member of Parliament, over $50 million in training.
Wow.
It's a lot of money, but we've practically doubled that money with other contributions as well.
Yeah.
So how many people do you get trained for this amount of money? You get a lot. You get hundreds and hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And that's why today we have 65% Indigenous employment at the mine site, where nearly just under half of them are women being employed.
Wow.
So it's a great success story. And I really believe that if that model was used by other mining companies, and not just signing an IBA and say, we're going to hire local people, local people can't work for you unless they're qualified to work for you.
Yes.
They can't work for you unless they have training. We train people in universities, in college and trade institutions. We train them at home in their own communities. It depended on the job that they were gearing themselves for and what the company needed people for. So it was various levels of training. Not everyone went to university for 4 years and worked at the mine.
Yeah.
Some people just did on-the-job training and basic safety courses and things of this nature. So it was a combination of different training and education initiatives that allowed them to be qualified for those jobs, that allowed them to be hired for those jobs. I don't have to tell you that mining jobs in the north pay well. Mining jobs pay well overall. I watched whole communities of women turned their lives around by going from living on $25,000 a year to retraining, getting a job at the mine site, and earning $95,000 a year.
great.
It allowed them to be able to put their own children in universities.
Yeah.
It allowed them to be able to buy their first homes, to do things they could never do before, and in fact, never dreamed of doing before.
Yeah.
And all it required was time, investment, and wanting to make the employment of Indigenous peoples and women a priority.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you find a way.
Yeah.
So anyone want to talk about the model that we've used that have been highly successful? So successful, in fact, that we use it for the surface mining and to train people for underground mining. And where did we train the underground miners? We trained them in Sudbury,
Yeah, good.
which Jenny Lou is very familiar with.
Jenny Lou, you have the final words because we're already almost, times is almost up. I told you that would be a fantastic panel, you know, with a wealth of experience. You know, what are the key words for forward-looking statement, you know, like in terms of successful participation of Indigenous women? What would be your best advice based on your experience?
I think for Indigenous women to enter the mining industry, you know, it lands on everything that you just shared with us. You know, having the right tools and support to uplift Indigenous women, to ensure that there's more opportunities going forward for Indigenous women than there were for me, that there's more procurement opportunities for Indigenous businesses. And it's also about relationship building and building an understanding between the mining industry and First Nations and Indigenous communities, having an understanding of what our values are. Our values are the environment, the water, the next 7 generations. And sometimes that doesn't always fit into a financial model or a mine plan. But I think that's the work that needs to be done to de-risk projects and move them forward at the speed that they need to be advanced, you know, in this day and age. So I think it's just building the capacity within our communities, creating a pipeline of Indigenous women that want to enter the industry and be mentors for the next generation that are coming up. And, you know, it was probably 12 or 13 years into my career until I came across another Indigenous woman that was working in the mining industry in the technical field.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me because I never had anybody to look up to that looked like me, that had the same experience as me as a First Nations woman. So I think that's really important.
Well, that's good. That's great. You know what? I think we, all three of us as Indigenous persons, we experience that. We experience the challenges in the industry. And then we overcame. You know, we were not sitting there just like, okay, oh, I'm a victim in here. No, we just came up stronger. And you know, Yvonne, it's an anecdote. While you were working on the Voices Bay Agreement, I was on the other side of the fence. You know, we were with the placards, you know, and then I was saying like, no to voice, INCO, no INCO, and so on and so forth. You know, and here I am now, you know, a mining executive for the last 20 years of my life.
Yep.
You know, and so I think that's how about you reach success in the industry. We have time for a short question. If any of you want to ask questions, otherwise I will thank our is there anyone in the group? Yes, please. Feel free to go to the mic. There's 1, 2, 3.
No, everybody's good.
So I think our explanations were very clear, and then that's a clear example of you know, how we can bring success in our communities and how women can be the strong leaders in the community to bring success in all those resource development projects.
Yeah.
I will leave you with a quote that I got from this book, okay, just around the corner. Communities, Indigenous communities, need strong female leaders with vision to solve issues and support progress for generations to come. And that's a quote from your book.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. Yvonne. Miigwech.
Miigwech.
Timiigwech, and then please feel free to have a discussion with those strong Indigenous women from the industry. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Mr.
Armand.
Schmidtno.
Great job.